Hello everyone, and welcome now to game 2 in the series. And the series, well, I gotta say, in game 1 it took me a little bit by surprise to actually see Muta Ling off of 3 bases very early on. Crank actually opened up with that front door pylon seal, and TheCoolMan really kept his cool. He didn't overreact, he responded very well, and he continued to play his game. Many times I've seen players, low-level masters, high diamond players, just simply lose their cool and forget their game plan going in. Oftentimes, if you can throw a Zerg player off of their timing, not get them set up with their third hatchery at the right time, the builds just really tend to fall apart. But then TheCoolMan came back over the top, saw the very, very fast expansion coming in from Crank, and then responded with a quick 4th base of his own. And when you do start a base race against a Zerg player, if the Zerg player has an additional base on you, it is generally very hard to stop. On top of that, Crank did not have Colossi in his attack, and with that, going Zealot Archons, all TheCoolMan had to do was simply respond with 8 to 10 spine crawlers on the ramp, and that was pretty much all she wrote. Alright, let's take a look here on Entombed Valley. It is going to be Crank spawning on the top left as the blue Protoss. Meanwhile, TheCoolMan spawning as the red Zerg on the bottom right, actually going for a bit of an extractor pool. So extractor pool here on Entombed Valley means that we could have a little bit more map control coming in from TheCoolMan. This does come as a bit of a surprise to me, but we do have a rather large ramp here. It really comes down to Protoss players, how they utilize this rather large ramp. I've seen some Protoss players just build straight down here. I've seen some Protoss players utilize the buildings along their back and then force field trap units in and attack there as well. Both styles are viable, as we are going to see Crank now simply move up, spot an Overlord, see that the Overlord is actually flying in the wrong direction, and pretty much knows that his opponent is now on the bottom right hand side of the map. So far, we are going into a pylon here at the front door. We could be getting in a gateway. Nope, there is that photon cannon. There is that gateway. And I believe we're going to see the units be forced to run into these destructible rocks first. Let's take a look at what TheCoolMan is doing. TheCoolMan is currently researching that metabolic boost, pulling the rest of the drones back onto the minerals, not harvesting any gas whatsoever, as he now needs to get up a very strong economy. This one particular probe may or may not make its way back. It's pretty much a 100% chance that it may or may not make its way back home, as it is getting poked apart. I do believe that it has enough time to make its way back inside. That photon cannon on the front door should be enough, as the probe is gonna now simply reach the safety of that photon cannon there. Once this gateway is done, we are going to see perhaps the Cybernetics core, and then see this game finally get underway. I do like this little bit of a head fake by Crank there. He purposely went up and then went back down and went back out, and now this probe has more scouting to do. Now, if TheCoolMan was perhaps trying to take a faster third base here, which is not altogether uncommon, then Crank would be able to respond very, very quickly. Another thing Crank could do is he could try to warp in a pylon here and get power up onto the high ground, and then perhaps do a bit of a run by as when he finally walks in with this particular probe. Probe is taking a bit of damage there. You can see the claw, or the little bit of the darts or acid spines. It's no longer the claws. I don't know if you guys noticed that, but back in the day when the range of the ground attack was 3, it actually said claws instead of acid spines. Why would you use different acid spines for air and ground, Queen? I do not know. Perhaps one's more aerodynamic and fly farther, but then wouldn't you want to use that one to hit the ground units as well? Yeah, I'm not going to question it. Let's take a look back over here. Sentries now being added on the front. This is that second gateway, and we are chrono boosting out the sentries and also chrono boosting out that warp gate tech. With that warp gate tech, we'll see what Crank's actually trying to do. I don't see that many gateways, and I'm still looking for another building. I'm really expecting, is there 2 more gateways? Okay, so this is 2 more gateways, but based upon off of 2 bases, you can normally get away with 6 to 7 production buildings for Protoss. There's no robotics facility, no sign of any upgrades, so Crank should end up starting to sit on a large amount of resources unless he does something differently. This is actually a little bit odd for Crank right now, as he is going into that Twilight Council. He may perhaps be going into High Templar, or perhaps trying to get into Blink. He has a good amount of sentries, but he doesn't have a very balanced... Excuse me. Alright, apparently T-Mobile felt the need to keep on sending me text messages. Anyways, let's come off over here. We are going to see TheCoolMan come into this location. There are some Banelings and Zerglings now lying in wait. The Zealots are attempting to take down these destructible rocks. Crank wants to try and take this expansion here, but lo and behold, it is going to be a trap. Zerglings and now Overlords with creep, meaning we could have a bit of a problem, as we are going to perhaps see a drop inside the main base. Oh, this is going to be absolutely devastating, as we are now transitioning into Hydralisk and that 3rd base. All of these units down over here. What is happening? There in comes the units. Zerglings are now being dropped down. Where are the Banelings? I don't see the Banelings. The Banelings are right there, and the Overlords could actually take down all of those sentries. Beautifully done, taking down a lot of those sentries and now running amok inside the main. This is going to cause some serious problems, as now creep is going to be spread here as well. Additional gateways coming in. Beautiful play coming in from TheCoolMan, as Baneling carpet bombing, dealing some serious damage there. How many workers were lost? Only 5. A lot of workers in the red, and this goes to show you how important upgrades are. If those Banelings had level 2 melee attack upgrades, they would have taken down multiple probes. Every probe with a little bit of hit points and a whole bunch of shields would right now be dead if there were those upgrades. Currently, we are seeing that 59 drones compared to 46 probes, and more Banelings are still being added to this group. We can see Stalkers are in position over here. They want to make sure that they can intercept any more of that Baneling carpet bombing, and it's going to place Crank a little bit more on the passive defensive end. Now, this is a dangerous position to be when you're going up against a Zerg player, as Zerg players really like to expand rather quickly. And you can now see that TheCoolMan with Hydralisk here can perhaps move into this base here with little to no effort, especially with those very fast moving Hydralisks, as long as they are on creep. Overlord's taking care of that problem for him right now, but we should be seeing more queens for some creep tumors. Groove Spines giving an additional range to those Hydralisks from 5 to 6 will definitely help out. Hydralisks do attack slightly faster than a Marine. Very high DPS. They are somewhat of a glass cannon though, as they only have 80 hit points and do tend to fall apart. Zealots, Stalkers now wandering around the far side here, and this is a rather large army coming in from Crank. If you take a look at army supply, Crank is pretty much neck and neck, and now he needs to do something with any advantage that he has. Oh, this could be bad as well. There is one, Banelings off over here in that Overlord, and all of these Zealots may get taken down. Also, we see one Observer here, and the Hydralisk may get off some easy shots. Hydralisk, however, does not want to engage against that many Stalkers, as the Zerglings are now trying to engage here. Here we go. Hydralisk and Roaches, both sides fighting, but great peeling by Crank should mean that TheCoolMan is going to be in a bit of trouble. However, Baneling's now latching on to those Zealots and quickly getting taken down. Zerglings now need to try to get an engagement there, unable to do so. And TheCoolMan is still sitting very strong here at 113 supply compared to Crank's 97. Alright. Let's take a look at the army compositions again. 43 supply compared to 57. Let's take a look at army cost. Even though that the cost there's more supply for TheCoolMan, we do see a higher overall cost for Crank. in terms of both minerals and gas. The majority of the supply is lost in workers, as the stalkers are now simply returning home. The problem with the stalkers, though, is that they are not effective against Hydralisks. And once a couple peels, once those stalkers do blink back, they are out of range from those Hydralisks. They can't take any more damage, but they also can't dish out damage. On top of that, the Hydralisks are actually dealing less than 10 damage a second. Meanwhile, the stalkers are dealing less than 10 damage a second, while the Hydralisks are actually dealing more than 15. That does tend to add up very, very quickly, as the Roaches and Hydralisks are now finally on the move. The problem will be that the Hydralisks are significantly slower off of creep, since this is not Heart of the Swarm. Alright, a new base now finally being established here. Crank now trying to establish this Nexus off here at the 11 o'clock position. Is it going to be enough? As the Zerglings now pretty much facing wall after wall, not quite sure where to go. We are going into level 3 weapons upgrade, as the Zerglings and the Roaches almost take down that pylon. Yes, there's the cancellation on the rest of those units. No, absolutely no sentries in this group, as both sides now engage. Here comes the carpet bombing Overlords. Overlords could be completely empty, but Crank cannot take that chance at this point, as this Nexus will once again fall. Beautiful, beautiful play by TheCoolMan in this game so far, pretty much catching Crank out of position every step of the way with some old school strategies that don't seem to get old. Now, let's take a look at the warp gates. What is going to be coming in next? We do have Blink, but Crank is now in trouble. He needs to try to get in a gateway there. Is he going to be able to get it? Unable to get it off in time, as another gateway does fall. Hydralisks and Roaches are, some of them are engaging, some of them are not. So TheCoolMan needs to get in a better position, as now the warp gate is down. And with that, sorry, not the warp gate, the Cybernetics core is down. And with the Cybernetics core down, Crank can only train up Zealots. In comes another round of Baneling carpet bombing, doing a lot of splash damage. It may not deal bonus damage to those Stalkers, but the sheer fact that those Banelings are hitting 2 to 3, or at least 5 to 6 of those Stalkers, or 5 to 6, or at least 2 to 3, really shows how much damage is being added up there. Alright, Hydralisks, you're going to simply turn around. They know that they cannot run away from Blink Stalkers and hope to survive. Beautiful blink back by Crank. And with this engagement here, Crank actually looking pretty strong. He has evened up the resources. Let's take a look at the economic game, as we see it is 58 to 56. And there was a bit of a... or this hatchery lost here just moments ago during this engagement here. So how many workers were lost? 2 workers to 7. It looks like all the hatchery was simply lost, but and also that warp prism. All right, Observer now on the move here. TheCoolMan should be trying to reestablish this hatchery momentarily. There was a good amount of drones mining here, but I believe all of them were able to escape. You can see fairly heavy saturation here, also perhaps heavier saturation here, and some saturation here as well. But it really feels like TheCoolMan doesn't have the sheer number of drones that he should at this point in the game. Let's take a look at the army supply, 84 to 51 in favor of TheCoolMan. And in terms of cost, we see TheCoolMan once again taking the edge and taking the lead there. Production tab, however, now showing a robotics facility and now a robotics bay. Robotics bay does mean Colossi, as changelings are going to try and perhaps make a bit of a move. But no, the Stalkers, are they going to go ahead and kill those changelings? Yes, they are. Gateways are here, making sure that there's not going to be any run-bys there. Stalkers now engaging quickly, blinking back, knowing that they cannot do very much, as we now have 200 hit point Banelings making their way in, doing some carpet bombing. Here you go. There is all of those units there. The Banelings are getting dropped down. A lot of damage was dealt. However, everything is now pretty much caught on the low ground, and I believe TheCoolMan is losing his cool here. He should not be engaging. He's just trying to do the same strategy over and over and trying to break this front door. But Crank responding very well, pulling back, and now I believe TheCoolMan has start to lose more units. Production tab shows 55 drones to 56 probes. Drones are not really being added here. Meanwhile, Crank is still adding probes, and this may actually be his savior. As the game goes longer, Crank is going to be able to mine from his third or his fourth base much more efficiently, as the main base is now nearly mined out here. You can see some probes are being transferred. We are going to get a little bit into that walk of shame as some long distance mining will take place. No upgrades on the Zerglings. Roaches are upgraded 2-0. Meanwhile, Stalkers are upgraded 3-0 alongside those Colossi. 3 Colossi grouping together as we now see a blink forward here, almost taking down one Overlord. The Overlord still spewing that creep, and now we are going to see a move out into the center portion of the map. There are no sentries with this combination of units, which does concern me, as Crank really needs to funnel in some of these units. Alright, Corruptors now making their way over. Roaches and Hydras now making their way in as well. Stalkers, Colossi backing off. And here we go, Roaches. Zerglings now trying to make their way in here at the 12 o'clock position. And pretty much TheCoolMan knows that he cannot let Crank get up this base. If this base does get up and running, the economic advantage for Crank will simply be too much. Zealots now off over here, perhaps going to try to do a run by and run into this 6 o'clock center location, as we see a whole torching of Zerglings there. Colossi, there are currently 5 Colossi here, and I don't believe it's gonna matter. There are a lot of Corruptors, and once all those Corruptors are dead, who's gonna come out on top? TheCoolMan with 154 supply, 146 supply, but you gotta remember, 13 of those are in Corruptors, and those Corruptors are not going to be doing much of anything any longer. We do not have a Greater Spire, and without a Greater Spire, TheCoolMan has invested heavily into these Corruptors with now no place for them. Let's take a look at the army. 3850, 2150. These Zealots now need to run in and deal a lot of damage. It looks as though Zerglings, Hydralisks, and Roaches are already there, ready to respond, as Crank is still down by about 25 supply, but this game is still neck and neck. These Corruptors perhaps waiting for Hive Tech, and then on top of that, we'll need to wait for Broodlords. Alright, so the Greater Spire, we are about, I would say about 2 minutes away from seeing Broodlords. If Crank can break the front door and make something happen here in the next minute and a half, I do not believe TheCoolMan will be able to respond in time. Roaches are still being added. TheCoolMan knows that this is his most vulnerable. Until he gets up that Greater Spire, he cannot attack. He cannot have any engagement go very poorly. Meanwhile, Crank perhaps doesn't know that this is the time to strike, even though he is behind. He should not be investing in Colossi. He should really be investing in many more Immortals, and then hoping that there's not that many Hydralisks, which there are in fact not. Nexus about halfway done here. We are going to see some Zerglings now make their way over, may be able to force another cancellation, as the Zerglings are checking for additional expansions. 60 supply discrepancy between these two players, as TheCoolMan is now looking to wait for the next 70 seconds and then get that massive Broodlord army that he's always been hoping for. There is that melee attack level 1 upgrades for those Zerglings, and more importantly, those Broodlings now. An observer still wandering around. Perhaps it doesn't see the sheer number of Corruptors. Does it know about the Hive Tech? This is actually concerning me a lot. Yes, it knows about the Hive Tech. It's got to know about the Greater Spire now. What is he thinking? If he knows that there's Hive Tech, he has to know that Greater Spire is coming in, and he knows that he needs to get something done. Psystorm still needs about another 70 seconds or so, 60 seconds or so. There are a good number of High Templar, but we do not see a Stargate, nor do we see a Fleet Beacon for the possible Archon Toilet. Alright, High Templars will need to get off a lot of beautiful Psystorms here to make anything happen, as now we have Broodlords. Broodlords are making their way out. We are also going into Infestor. Infestor, Broodlords, such a strong combination, as High Templar is going to get taken down. There goes one. You cannot afford to lose those High Templars at this situation, at this time. They have to be alive in order to deal the necessary damage and whittle out some of these Broodlords here. These Broodlords are simply massive, massive now, especially with Infestors. The infestors have a fair amount of energy, almost getting up to 125, should be able to get off the fungal growth, and then 2 to 3 infested Terrans that they need. Archons are in this group as well. High Templar, are we going to see the necessary Psi Storms here? Here is that engagement. No Psi Storm as the Guardian Shields quickly raised up. And now where is that engagement? There is some attacks. There's some Psi Storm there, and a beautiful Psi Storms, beautiful feedbacks, but I do not believe the Psi Storms are actually hitting the Broodlords. Crank is taking a beating here, and this is just simply not looking good, as TheCoolMan should be able to move his way forward and take down all of these Stalkers, as there is a 78 supply discrepancy between these two armies. Alright, more units will be coming out. Level 3 missile attack, level 2 Zerg flyer attack, as the Broodlords are dropping off the kids, causing so many problems. Not enough Blink Stalkers, especially with... Oh, no, Broodlords may actually get focused down here. Is it going to be enough? The Stalkers do have a little bit of armor upgrades, but I believe the sheer number of Broodlords is going to be too much, and that is the GG. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Hope you guys enjoyed Game 2. Stay tuned for Game 3.